quite pretty.
My name is Caolan Robertson, and I co-produced Farmlands with my colleague George Llewellyn-John and of course Lauren Sutton. Obviously this was an incredibly challenging process to put together. It was highly emotional as a subject and obviously very, very intensely serious as a subject, which meant that it had to be told in the right way. And the stories of these people are so powerful that it had to be told properly. So some background on it: it took 10 days to actually film and another 10 days just to do all the logistics and put it all together. But about 638 hours to edit between myself and George, which was so intense. But the reaction has been incredible. It got 1 million views. It hit 1 million about 5 days ago, which is 1 million in the first month of release. We didn't expect that to happen until Christmas. So the response has been incredible, and of course this sort of project would not be possible without the support of people like you coming here, sharing it online, buying tickets. It's been overwhelming, and Lauren's got so many more projects like this to work with me and George in the pipeline over the next few years, and as an incredibly talented young woman, she's going to be doing so many more incredible things like this. So thank you all so much for coming, and I hope you enjoy the show tonight.
Awesome. So now we've got the changeover between events. The main event is coming up at 8 o'clock, and general admission will be allowed into the room at 7:30. So right now, if you don't have an early admission ticket or a ticket to the meet and greets or the dinner, we'd like to ask you to leave the auditorium and head out back, just to let the early entry ticket holders get what they paid for. If you do stay in here, we're going to ask you to show us your pink wristband one by one, and we'll start moving back with a process of elimination. And make sure you've got the good seats, because we're about to reserve some for those dinner guests who won't get in here on time. Thank you.
Yes, well, I can. Thank you very much. My name is James Fox-Higgins. I'm the editor-in-chief of a YouTube channel called The Rational Rise. It's my real great honour to be here this evening to introduce the first speaker to you. Now, 2 years ago, well, let's go back 3 years ago, I was a good blue pill popping, liberal, environmentalist, multiculturalist. Forgive me, I was raised in the Tweed Valley. That's the Rainbow region for anyone who hasn't heard of it. It's just the default position there. But I was given a book by a friend of mine. His name is Rob. He's here tonight. And it was a book called Everyday Anarchy. And some of you might have read that. It's by Stefan Molyneux. That book opened my eyes to how much bullshit we cop from the mainstream media, from our educational institutions, and from our culture about the way the world ought to operate. And that was just the beginning for me. It's been a long roller coaster ride since then, but I began to rationalise so that I could follow in the footsteps of people like Stefan Molyneux, who are bravely speaking truth to power, and who are stepping around the systems that exist to keep us from that truth. So it's, without much further ado, it's my great honour and my privilege to welcome to the stage, when he's ready, the wonderful, the fabulous, the very entertaining and the prolific Stefan Molyneux. Give it up!
Thank you very much! How beautiful to see you! Thank you so much. Wow, what a great crowd. You guys look beautiful. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. How many protesters do we have outside? 20. I think it's safe to say we outnumber them. It's kind of sad that in Adelaide there was just a couple of them. Did you see the racist dog? I don't know why I hate dogs, but it was raining, and you know, they have their signs, and they don't look like they can hold signs for very long, right? So we sent out some umbrellas. No, seriously, because like blue dye is bad for your eyes, right? So as it starts going down, like some melting avatar, we sent out the umbrellas, and they left with them. Sorry, they socialized them. My mistake. But do we have any tweeters here tonight? You over there? Are you tweeting? Because, so, the New Zealand media, does anything happen in New Zealand except they wait for Canadians to come? One day soon. I'm going to start typing about Canadians. They really have gone quite mad in the media there. And the funny, so they had someone last night in Sydney, they had someone live tweeting the speech. Now the funny thing is, this is not exactly CIA level undercover work. What is he speaking about? We don't know. We've got to find out. Buy a ticket, go and tweet. Dudes, they're online. The speeches have been uploaded. You're not doing any undercover work here. This is not a mystery. But they did, and they tweeted, and they could have just linked to the speech, right? I mean, I do the speech, and don't worry, I'll start soon. But anyway, I do the speech, and they could just link to the speech. But no, can't do that, because I'm funny, and I have charisma. So we can't have the actual speech with the actual facts and the actual argument. We have to have some guy's misinterpretation, mischaracterization of the speech. Otherwise, people might get the facts. No. It's sort of like, want to go see a movie? No. But can I go watch someone tweet about a movie? It's a great concert. Want to go? No. I just want someone to tweet to me about the concert. Why would I want to go to the concert? So, when Lauren and I first talked about coming to Australia, I mean, I know this, thank you. Like, without you guys, it's a weird show. So, no, it's a weird show anyway, but it's even weirder without you guys, so thank you guys for being here. So, I'd heard through the grapevine that some other North American acts had come through here, and they weren't particularly specific to Australia, darling. Subtle, I know. So, I sat down with my producer and we started brainstorming about things to do regarding Australia topics. You know, this is your house, I'm a guest, and I appreciate being here, so I wanted to talk about things that would be of interest to you. So, you know, like any good researcher, we sort of sit down and we start at the beginning. Now, the beginning is the Aboriginal culture. So I thought, all right, I've heard about the noble savage. I don't really agree with it, but you know, I'm open, data, you know, let's find out. So we started researching into Aboriginal culture. Well, you'll see. But it's important because I want to sort of make a philosophical argument, of course, about two cultures. Obviously there's the European, Western culture, the white culture. And then there's the Aborigine culture, and there was a collision. 1-1. And then you get a wonderful culture and civilization and glowing cities of light arising out of the very desert itself. And another lost. And then, like, in general, cultures that lose, they either vanish or they turn into guilt-tripping manipulators to extract endless resources from the giant red vending machine called white guilt. And I'm here to make a case for you that this is desperately unhealthy, for you, for the Aborigines, and stop it. Stop it, stop it, stop it. Aborigines in Australia for about 40,000 years, give or take. You guys, 200 and change, give or take. So for the mathematically inclined, you, Europeans for the most part, European-derived whites, you've had Australia for 0.5% of the time the Aborigines had Australia. It's been a bit of a change. For the better. For the better. And why? Well, if you look at the Aborigine culture, the first place I always start when I'm looking at a culture is I look at the metaphysics, which is the fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality. Now, the West, for thousands of years, has been struggling to subsume metaphysics under philosophy. We are not brains in a tank, we are not mere puppets in some Platonic universe of supernatural war. We are empirical beings who live in an objective universe which we strive and struggle to understand through the process of reason and evidence. That's our gig as Westerners, and I think it's been fairly successful. But there is another approach which the Aborigines take, which says that they believe in the dreaming, they call it, or the dream time. And I get there are 300 different bands, or 300 different language groups, 600 different bands, so I'm going to mix and match a little bit. There's a lot of commonality, there's some differences. But the Aborigines believe that they exist in this dream time, that the elders of the tribe, the ancient ones, that they created the world from a vast, empty, alien nothingness, like the conscience of a communist or something like that. And they formed, the ancient ones formed the world, they formed the animals, they formed the people, and then they kind of went to sleep. But they gave the Aborigine tribes what is called the law, or the custom. It's not common law like you and I would understand it, but these are sacred traditions that must always be enforced and which can never, ever, ever change. Ever. They have been described, the Aborigines, as the most conservative religion in the world. Which is kind of weird because the protesters seem really mad at conservatives. They come to us. So as a conservative culture, nothing can change. Nothing can change. And like all of us bipeds, they're curious about what the world is, where the stars came from, what the sun is, what the moon is. Now in the West, we have all of these questions, and we're not really satisfied until we have cogent, comprehensive answers. It is said of Aristotle that he would stand on the beach and he would stare at the moon, and he would go crazy trying to figure out where the tides were. They never imagined that something that big and that distant could affect the tides. But they would refuse to accept that it was just the breathing of the gods under the ocean. We're not satisfied with these answers. Which is why we keep asking more questions, keep refining our answers, and getting closer to this elusive jackrabbit called the truth. We are a restless and curious culture, and we don't accept magic as the explanation as to how things are. So the Aborigine culture, one of the myths that I looked up was the origin of the sun. Now, before the sun, this is according to the Aborigine culture, before there was the sun, everything was done by moonlight. How you have moonlight without the sun is not particularly well explained. But they seem pretty content with not very good explanations. So you had moonlight, and then one day, the emu and the crane were fighting. And the crane, I think, took the emu egg and just hurled it into the sky, where it burst into flame, and there was light, and there was greatness and wonderful, and everyone said, like, you know, you walk out of the movie theater like, ah! And the gods thought this was really cool. And they said, okay, we're going to do this every day. We're going to get up early, as gods do. We're going to gather some wood, and we're going to light it on fire, and that's going to be the sun, and that's how you're going to see. Problem, though, of course, you've got to work these things out. They would do this when they saw the morning star. But the problem is sometimes it's cloudy, right? If it's cloudy, you can't see the morning star. So they said, okay, we've got a plan. We're going to listen for the call of the kookaburra bird. When the kookaburra bird calls, we'll know that it's morning and we'll light the eye. Now, you can see me, I can't really see you, there are no cameras on you, so I'm just wondering if anybody in the audience is good at imitating the kookaburra bird. Don't be shy. Give me the vivid Australian experience. Does it really sound like a hyena with epilepsy, or is that, are you trolling me at this point? Oh, he won't know. He's from Canada. He's not used to it being warm at this time of year. All right, so it's something like that, right? Now, you are totally in trouble with the Aborigines, my friend, because one of the rules was you are not allowed to imitate the kookaburra bird. Because if you imitate the kookaburra bird will get offended. It will not sing, and the world will be plunged into eternal darkness. So their big concern, obviously, was both hate speech and global cooling. There were horrifying punishments for breaking these laws, these rules. And some of the rules were around, like no incest and so on. But some of them were, most of them were just these kinds of crazy rules, like don't do this, don't do that. Punishment. If you were a woman and you were accused of breaking these rules, the punishment, in many tribes, was that the elders would drag you out into the bush and they would gang rape you. If you submitted to it, they would say, all right, we'll move on. The punishments for simply being born in Aborigine tribes were horrendous. Anybody want to take a guess as to the mortality rate, not through accident, not through malnutrition, not through disease, but through being killed? The murder rate or infanticide rate for Aborigine children? What percentage would you guess of Aborigine children were murdered by their parents? 10%? 30%? 30 to 50%. 30 to 50%. If the Europeans, your ancestors, had come to Australia and had killed 30 to 50% of the Aborigine children, people would rightly be up in arms about such a monstrous massacre, endless, bottomless, continent-wide massacre of Aborigine children. But you see, because the Aborigines did it themselves, it's culture. It must be respected. No. I'm a philosopher. I don't care what skin color the hands were that choked the life out of the babies. I don't care. If it was white, you're wrong. If it's Aborigine, you're wrong. And they did it for tens of thousands of years. 40,000 years, let's say 20 years a generation. 30 to 50% of babies. Estimates range from 2 to 700, maybe 750,000. There's millions and millions and millions of babies who were killed. Did you know how they were killed? It's important to know. They were strangled. They would lift them by the feet, bash their heads against a rock. Sometimes they would lay them on their backs in their swaddling, and they would pour sand into their little mouths until they asphyxiated, slowly, staring into their mother's eyes. Sometimes they would just leave the babies behind in the bush when they moved again. For what? Exposure, dehydration? Dingoes, of course. I'm not doing the line. I tried it, but we've all suffered enough from Meryl Streep, so. Yes. I love Roman Polanski. So I could do that for about a week, just thinking of the willies.
She's a turd.
She's a turd? Well, there's a four-letter word that I got last night that was not quite turd, but all right. You're much more polite here. We got the real Australia last night. For the punishment of children, and there was no particular rhyme or reason, it was just these were the rituals to gain to adulthood. They would sometimes take little girls and the little finger, the second knuckle, they would either tie it off to the point where it just, the end of the finger died and fell off, or if they were in more of a rush, they would jam the finger into, you got some bastard ants here, right? Yeah, they'd jam it into an ant hole, and the ants would eat off the top of the finger, and the anthropologist who studied this says, it would take an hour or so, and they would knock out the two front teeth, top front teeth of the boys in particular. You had adult circumcision. You had the hacking off of a labia with stone knives on a regular basis. When a woman was betrothed, and they were sometimes promised to men as babies, like Sweden. It pains me to say it, but it's true. It's a big debate now. We're wrestling with child marriage. Well, that's what happens when the Swedish government helps destroy South Africa with communist propaganda. It's a little bit of blowback. Wages of sin is cultural death. But cicatration, do you know what that is? Cicatration? So cicatration is when you use stone knives to hack your skin up, and then you rub ash and you rub clay into the wound to raise those, like the little long dorsal fins in your skin. When a woman was promised to a man, before the wedding night, the women would take her out into the bush and would deflower her with something called a digging stick. I'm sorry to talk about these things, but it's important. It is important. Cannibalism. This is the culture. So in reading about it, you do hear reports of cannibalism. Sometimes if a child was born and then another child was born shortly thereafter, sometimes the second child would be killed so that there was more mother's milk available for the first child, because growing up was really tough. The Aborigines spent an average of 5 hours a day just trying to scrape together at bare bones 2,000 calories. And they would gather seeds. They didn't grow it, no agriculture, for reasons we'll get into in a sec, but they would gather these seeds together and they would grind them with these rocks, and the stone dust would go into the bread that they would cook. And then they would eat them, and of course, chewing on bread / stone destroys your teeth. And a lot of the skulls that are recovered from burial sites, the molars are half worn away, and the roots are exposed, and it's an agonizing existence. Agonizing existence. Up to 80% of the children's bones, when the adults are grown, they can look and see where the growth stalled. 3 or so stallings of growth, like there were just so much malnutrition that growth stops in the teenage years. Constantly spent 40,000 years hungry and apparently thirsty. And then when the Western man comes, there's a lot of food. And these punishments and these brutalities are astonishing and bottomless. And when the Westerners came, when the Europeans came, they did their very best to keep the sand out of the babies' mouths and to keep the babies' brains off the rocks. And you know what they call that? Colonialism. You have 40,000 years of men and women on a continent that basically is like walking on a crowded beach of shells, except the shells are the skulls of babies. And the Westerns come and say, stop this. It's monstrous. It is barbaric. It is brutal. It is evil. And who gets blamed? Who gets blamed for stopping these crimes? The whites. Hey, you ever want to get blamed for slavery? Stop slavery. around the world. Put an end to slavery around the world. This was the goal of the abolitionists, Wilberforce and others from the late 18th, 19th century. The amount of blood and treasure that England and other nations spent to put an end to slavery worldwide can scarcely be calculated. And now, of course, because whites felt really bad about slavery and Christians felt really bad about slavery, we put an end to it. And now, of course, whites and Christians are the only people blamed for slavery. Because in this cold, amoral Nietzschean universe, in the chilly, amoral space between cultures, no good deed goes unpunished. Oh, you care about slavery? Enough to put an end to slavery? Whoa, you guys really care about slavery? Oh, that's great. Now we can start hammering your compassion. We can start hammering your pathological altruism. And we can get resources from you. Because you care. And it is that caring that will be our undoing unless we rein it the hell in. Morality is a relationship. It is not an abstract commandment. It's not physics. It's not like gravity. You make arrangements to pay someone for something. If they don't deliver that something, you don't pay them. When you want to extend your natural tribal in-group preference out into the world, you wait and see if it comes back. And if it doesn't come back, cut off that compassion, or it will be used against you. When I was first in Melbourne, this is my first city, I wanted to see the countryside and outside the cities, of course, because cities are cities. So I went on a little tour called Puffing Billy with my family. You guys ever? It's cool, right? I loved trains when I was a kid. I had a train set. I slept under a train set. I loved trains, and so I was really excited to go on this train. But it was like I went through this weird portal to China. I'm not kidding. My bodyguard, my wife, my daughter, myself. The only white people on the whole train. Do you know the percentage in Australia of foreign-born or foreign people, citizens?
What is that?
28.4%. What are you guys doing? What is your government doing? I know 80% of Australians want 0% foreign ownership of Australian land. Did your ancestors homestead it to sell it to the Chinese? This does not seem like the plan. And this is what I mean about reciprocity. Can any of you go and buy out massive chunks of China? Can any of you go to university in China and get citizenship virtually thereafter? Hell no. I know a guy who moved to Japan, got married, has been there for, I don't know, 10, 15 years. He said and he's married to a Japanese woman, and he said according to the Japanese government, she's basically a single mom because they will barely recognize that he's a carbon-based life form, let alone a citizen. No, you gotta start getting this stuff straight. You've got to start getting this stuff straight. The things we will do to prop up the real estate value of the boomers' houses. It's brutal. So the Aborigines, sorry, I'm back. I could go on that one for a while, but I was going to say that for the Q&A if you like. So the Aborigines were so certain of their rules that nothing could be questioned, nothing could be altered, nothing could be changed. Nothing. The rules could not be examined. Even nature itself around them could not be altered. It was against the will of the ancient ones and the elders to plant a garden was against the rules. And as you know, the punishment was death. Physical death or sexual genetic death. Ostracism, no sexual reproduction. Which means that they were kind of environmentalists, right? Because you can't change the environment anymore because nature will get bad. They were socialists. If you had any excess, any extra, you had to share it with everyone. Or rock to the head. Then a welfare state. Now that of course means the way that whites, Europeans became smarter is winter. Because you've got to plan for winter, and you've got to defer gratification, and you've got to go hungry January, February, March. When I was a kid, at the end of winter, you'd have a big feast of pancakes, right? Because you finally got food again. And the people who didn't plan, the people who didn't defer, who couldn't count, they died. And so we ended up smarter and smarter over time. Same thing happened with the East Asians in Siberia. But when you have this forced redistribution, being smart doesn't do you any good. Hey, look, I got extra food. Nah, you gotta share it. Forget it. It's like this long, slow motion Groundhog Day Venezuela for 40,000 years. So they were absolutely certain, the Aborigines, and they were absolutely wrong. And isn't that a weird thing that you see in life, where people are often both absolutely certain and absolutely wrong? Now, if you compare that to Greco-Roman, Judeo-Christian, and in particular Christian Western white culture, the foundational story of Western intellectualism is the story of Socrates, which I won't go into in great detail. I've got some YouTube videos on it, but very briefly, Socrates was a curious man, a philosophical man, and he was told by a friend of his who went to the oracle at Delphi and said, "Who's the wisest man?" And the oracle at Delphi, who cannot lie, said, "Socrates is the wisest man." Socrates' friend came to tell him this, and Socrates said, "Nah, that can't be right. I barely know anything." But the oracle can't lie, so what the heck does it mean? So he went to go and question all of the wise men of Athens and around, who said, "I know what justice is, I know what virtue is, I know what truth is, I know what goodness is, I know what all of these wonderful things, I know how the society should be organized, all these kinds of things." And he would ask them, this is the Socratic method, "Oh, you know what justice is?" And one man said, "I know that the good life is one of pleasure, hedonism." I guess boomers go back a ways. And Socrates said, "You ever get that itch? You know, you can't quite get there, and then you finally get there, it's like, oh, that moment." So if you had a perpetual itch that you were perpetually scratching for the rest of your life, that would be the ideal philosophical life. That can't be, right? So Socrates went and asked all of these people and found that they did not know what they thought they knew. And that humility, where the oracle was right about Socrates, because Socrates was the wisest man because he knew so little. But he knew the right questions to ask, and he knew that contradictions meant that knowledge was invalidated. And that curiosity, that restlessness, that inability to be satisfied with lies, the superstition, fantasy, emu eggs exploding into star, it's all a lie. It's a lie that's enforced by brutality. Government schools. And in the collision between these two cultures, between a culture that is both certain and wrong, and a culture that is uncertain but on the road to truth. See, arrogant idiocy can only survive in isolation. Which is why idiots tend to cluster together and wear black. Because they're absolutely certain. You know, Lauren and I have gone out to the protesters. Tell me, we want to know. Like, tell me what I'm missing. Tell me what I've gotten wrong. Tell me. Apparently what I've gotten wrong is just not having the word racist screamed into my face over and over again. Not American. And in this collision, it was inevitable that the arrogant certainty of the Aborigines was going to lose to the restless curiosity and rationality of the West. That is the way of things. Because I guarantee you that over the 40,000-year history, I know it's a bell curve a little bit to the left, but it's still a bell curve, that there were some very smart Aborigines who were born. And the Aborigines who were born, who were smart, probably didn't really go with some of these rules. Why are we knocking out the teeth for a young man? Why do we keep raping our women? Do we just invent these laws so we can rape our women? Like, why are we, like, I need some better answers than these lies. Not every single death that happens can be the result of bad magic that we have to go and avenge by throwing a spear at someone. This is not right. What if he just tripped? What do we have against vulvas? It's true. Primitive cultures, what is their issue with vulvas? These are not people to take to a seafood restaurant. Oh, that's a dark joke, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Before the show, I'm like, should I? Only in Australia. Because New Zealand isn't very sensitive. They have syllables, bad speak. Oh. I don't know, it's Freudian. How much do they love their moms? Vulva! So there were smart Aborigines who had questions. And what happened to them? They were killed. They were killed. Now in the West, don't get me wrong, we still kill truth tellers. But less. But less. And that makes all the difference. I don't know if you guys know about Price's Law. I've heard it referred to as Pareto's principle, but I think Price's Law, it's the square root of the workers in any given field who produce half the value. So if you have a company with 10,000 people, 100 of them are going to produce half the value. If they're incentivized, right, if there's a free market. And it's the same thing if you think back through history and philosophy. Give me philosophers that you like or have heard of or respect.
Stefan Molyneux.
Now that's the kookaburra bird sound I was listening for. Anything else? John Locke. Jordan Peterson. Psychologist, not philosopher, but go on. Socrates, Marcus Aurelius, great. Karl Marx. I would go more for philosophers, not spongers of the capitalist system who banged their maids and tossed them out in the street when they got pregnant because it's really bad to exploit the proletariat. Thomas Hobbes, great philosopher, dangerous as hell, but great. Right. It's not many when you think about it, right? How many of us have thoughts that are interesting, we write them down, we try to philosophize? It's not many, though, right? It's not many. The entire world economy, half of the value of the world economy is produced by less than 80,000 people. There's, what is it, 6, 7, 8 billion? I don't know, I can never remember because every time you turn around there's more. But it's not that many. So the price, of course, when you have people in your society who ask uncomfortable questions, who probe at your arrogant, stupid certainty with rational questions, you have a choice. You can say, makes me uncomfortable, but okay, tell me more. And that's all society is. That's all love is. Love is not, I love you, love is tell me more. Be curious about people, curious about things. So in the West, when some people asked uncomfortable questions, we would often say, tell me more. Or at least not kill them. Socrates made it to 70, right, before he got democratized. But the Aborigines, I think, is clear that they did not suffer the wise to live. And the price of that is clear. The price of that is stagnation. Before a marriage, in some Aborigine tribes, the elders would all gang rape the woman. It's like there's a theme. Now, why did they do this? They did this so that you didn't have a bond with your child and would prefer your child over other people's children, thus having a family unit, right? Destruction of the family unit. Socialism. Environmentalism. You see why the left loves the noble savage? They're the same damn people. There are people outside this very venue who would love to shut us up. Maybe even with a rock. Because they have arrogant certainty. I don't blame them. They've been indoctrinated. They're tragic figures because they care very passionately about these issues, but they cannot articulate an argument. They cannot reason. They cannot gather evidence. They cannot make a case. So they grab a sign, a bike lock. in Melbourne, a feral mob numbering in the hundreds attacked the buses that brought people to the venue. They tried to tip over buses with people in them, tried to tear the buses apart. These are dangerous times for thought. And if you ever want to know what we're fighting for, the right to speak, the right to listen, the right to make arguments, look at a society that rapes women, that mutilates children, that kills 30 to 50% of their offspring, and destroys the curious and the intelligent. It's not as far away as you think if they do gain the capacity to shut us down. We will fall. We will fall. You know what else the Aborigines and the left were quite habitual in? Abortion. Abortion is common practice in all pre-industrial societies, but in particular the Aborigine women would either eat these horribly bitter herbs, or they would pound their belly with rocks, or they would tighten constrictions, some kind of rope around their bellies in an attempt to choke off the flow of blood to the baby. We in the West have had really reason and free speech really for only a couple of hundred years. The Caucasian race as a whole, about 50,000 years old. We've had what I would call a really modern civilization. You can look at the ancient Greeks, but the ancient Greeks, of course, rested as the tip of the pyramid on a huge infrastructure of slavery, subjugation, and expansion. We've really only had a civilization for a couple hundred years. It's not long. It's not long at all. And we really, really have to keep it. And the question is how? Why am I talking about the Aborigines? Because you're told that you're illegitimate because you displaced a mass-raping, baby-murdering group of savages. You stopped crimes. You came to an incredibly violent and destructive continent and brought its first whiff of civilization ever. And for this, you are supposed to feel guilty. Hell no. Hell no. I'm down walking through the harbour in Sydney and there are these loudspeakers blaring. Sacred land. Honor the original inhabitants. Why? Why? If you or I or anyone we knew or any group we knew did those things, they would be condemned in the most grievous and expansive possible terms. I don't care the race of the people who committed these atrocities. I care that they're stopped, and it was your ancestors that stopped them. You are the policemen who arrested the endless bloodletting of primitivism. Apologize? Feel shame? Feel guilt? Hell no. Hell no. Now, the challenge is, we don't want to take pride in things that we have not achieved, right? Because that will blunt our desire or ambition to achieve them, or more things. So I don't like the idea of cultural pride, or racial pride, or white pride, or European pride. However, I do believe that admiration is a great motivator for the achievement of great things. 800 BC to 1950. It's quite a span. 800 BC to 1950. What percentage of scientific progress in the world came from Europe and North America, asterisk not including Mexico? $99.5? Very certain. Quite right. 98%. 98%. We, through most of this period, certainly scientifically, whites were the absolutely indispensable race for humankind to grow out of primitivism. If you were some alien observer, you just came down and had a look around, and you looked at world history, you looked at philosophy, you looked at art, classical music, entirely European. Basically 4 countries in Europe produced all classical music. Science, overwhelmingly white, European, overwhelmingly. We are the indispensable race. And it is to the great detriment of ourselves, our happiness, our culture, and the world as a whole, if we stare in the mirror and see only ogres and monsters and colonizers. It's false. It's false. Funny little contradiction. The left says, with regards to the Aborigines, you know, it's funny, so there's this little game you can play. I don't have a good name for it. 6 Degrees of White Nation, I don't know. But there's this game that you play where there's some dysfunction in the world and you see how long till white people get blamed. Can you make it like 1 skip? Do you have to do 2? Just stick it to whitey as quickly as you can. So I looked at some of the statistics of domestic abuse regarding the Aborigines. It goes way back. When they pull the women's skulls out of these burial grounds, they find that they have terrible divots about 1 centimeter deep on the left side of their heads, because a right-handed man hitting them with an implement regularly gave them, you know, cracked skulls, concussions. It was incredibly brutal, right? So I'm sitting there thinking, actually I wrote this out as a speech and then I thought, nah, forget it. So, and I was on the plane, I was just reviewing this stuff before coming here, and I'm like, okay, how long is it going to take for them to blame domestic abuse in Aborigines on whites? I swear, I get off the plane, I pick up a newspaper. Aborigine families are dysfunctional because white people stole their culture and their land. You know, like just how Lauren and I are to blame for police costs. I remember when the left didn't used to blame the victim. You know, ladies, if your husband's beating you up, don't call the cops. It costs money. It'll be your fault. It doesn't take long. So the left says, you see, it's really, really terrible. It's really terrible when your culture is destroyed. It's really terrible when you lose your history. Now tear down those statues, white people. Spit on your ancestors, white people. Shred every achievement of your culture and your civilization because you're evil, racist colonialists. Because it's just terrible, you see, when you lose your history, you hypocritical bastard leftists. It's terrible when it happens to the Aborigines. Okay, well, the culture was pretty murderous. Is it terrible when it happens to you? Yes, and worse. Because you have great nobility and heroism and courage and ingenuity and virtue in your history. It is terrible when people are taken as slaves. More Europeans were taken to the North African slave markets, more white people were taken to the North African slave markets than were ever taken from Africa to North America. Ever. You ever hear about that? No. Why not? It's not profitable. It's nothing to do with virtue. White guilt has nothing to do with universal standards. When I was reading about the massacres, massacres of the Aborigines, I'm like, ooh, that's a big word. It's coming from the left. Bet you it's nothing. So I started looking into the forest river. 8, 10, 12. Oh, that's bad. One estimate, somewhere between 1 and 1,000. Like to order some pizza, please? Sure, no problem. How many do you want? Somewhere between 1 and 1,000. I might be a little bit hungry. I might be in a Monty Python sketch. I don't know. It's insane. This is what they care about. If the people care about colonialism and murder and slaughter and so on, anybody know how many lives the Muslim invasion and takeover of India cost? 80 million people. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's no communism, but it's a lot. Anybody know how many black slaves died, were castrated and murdered at the hands of the Muslim slave traders and slave owners? 100 million. 100 million. Don't tell me these people care about mass murder or slaughter or massacre. They don't. They care about getting your money. And they will use your guilt and your virtue in order to do so. And you must stop this. You must stop this. It is unhealthy. It is contemptuous to the sacrifices and sufferings and virtues of your ancestors. And it will do something very terrible to you and your country in the long run. It's doing it now. I know this about white people. Been around a few. We go Chamberlain to Churchill like that. You know what I'm talking about? Don't let people push you. White people, very, very, very nice. Until they're not. Don't get pushed to that place. Don't. And there's an easy way to push back. Somebody starts with the white shame and white guilt. Is rape culture bad? Yes. There was no rape culture in the West, there never has been. Rape has been illegal for thousands of years in just about every Western country, certainly every common law system bans rape. It was legitimized and used as a tool of domination and subjugation and cultural enforcement by Aboriginal tribes for tens of thousands of years. Is infanticide bad? You know, people get mad at me about this speech. I'm sorry, I'm bothered by mass infanticide. The moral compass is so way off. What do we have to be so sorry for? Oh, I get it. Disease. Disease. First of all, smallpox didn't come from England, almost certainly. It was an 8-month voyage. There's no way you'd make it if you had smallpox. Smallpox most likely came from Malaysia or other places that were closer, 12 to 14 days boat ride, because the incubation period for smallpox is 12 to 14 days. So smallpox was almost certainly not brought by any Westerner. And it's like, yeah, virgin soil epidemic. Guess what? There was no theory of germ disease. Nobody knew what the heck was going on. Just lots of people were dying, and it was a real shame. And it was terrible. It wasn't anyone's fault. And it's funny to say, oh, it was used as a weapon of war. It was infected smallpox blankets. No evidence. Not even in North America. No evidence. One letter was written by some guys. No evidence. No evidence unless you have an agenda, in which case you don't need evidence. You just need excuses. But it's funny, the Black Death came from outside Europe, killed 1/3 of Europeans. Does anyone say it was weaponized biological warfare against Europeans? No. It was not that. So, what I do really, really want to say is that we are reenacting an old story in the West. It's an old Christian story, which has its virtues in the Christian canon and is utterly destructive when deployed by lunatic leftists. And that is original sin. You understand, right? Original sin is the idea that because of Adam and Eve, who disobeyed God, listened to the serpent and ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that they were cast out. Adam was cursed with work, Eve was cursed with childbirth. In other words, they grew up and became adults. Unlike some of our friends outside. And you are cursed with original sin, and if you go to the priest and you pay your money, then he'll say, okay, you're not cursed with it this week, but come back next week, give me some more money. You understand, right? That's the business, not the theology, not the faith. I'm just talking about some of the business aspects of it. And you are infected with something called white guilt, and you are programmed with it, and you are verbally abused into accepting it, because as kids, if you speak out against it, you will be harangued at by your teachers, failed at by your universities, run out of your place of employment. It's okay, I've got a plane ticket, so I can speak for you in this way. But you are given this curse. the original sin of colonialism, the original sin of occupation, of stealing the land from people who refused to, not only refused to speak the names of their dead, but wouldn't even go back to their burial sites. It's bad karma, bad magic. Who lived on the go. So you are evil colonialists, and you're bad, and you're wrong, and you're white, and you're racist. But, you know, give us a little money. We won't call you racist for 5 to 10 minutes. It's a shakedown, you understand? And our compassion, right? The whites, we don't have this big in-group preference thing going on. We have this whole universalism. It comes from Socrates, it comes from Aristotle, it comes from Jesus. The original was, thou shalt not kill other Jews. Then it became, thou shalt not kill, like a universal thing. Judaism, Islam, other religions, other belief systems, ferocious in-group preference, to hell with outsiders. We don't have that. It's why we're good. It's why we have human rights. It's why we universalize. It's why we say, sure, you can have our country. We're all carbon-based. We're all bipeds. But it's wrong. It's wrong. Universalism works only with people who believe in universalism. It does not work in other contexts and in other cultures. It's like diversity. Ah, diversity is a strength. Then why are you bringing in all these groups that have no interest in diversity? Makes no sense. Where's your reciprocity with the Chinese? They can come buy up your country, you can barely even visit theirs. They can come become your citizens, you can't become their citizens. What the hell are your leaders doing? Get yourself a Trump or two, for God's sakes. Put me on that table. So I'd like to exhort you. I don't want to bully you because there's been enough verbal abuse of whites over the past 100 years or so. But I will exhort you to let go of the guilt, to let go of the shame, to respect and admire what you have built here. You have made a palace out of a desert in this country. You have every right and every necessity to respect the sacrifices and courage and fortitude and industriousness of your ancestors who have braved the most horrendous elements to hand you the great gifts of freedom that you have.
Not if Jordan's got anything to do with it.
Yay! Sorry, that's an inside joke. I'm sure it's great. Wait. Oh, man.
He's a white guy!
You're still more polite than everyone in Sydney. Damn, I'm sorry. I forgot where I was. I'll start again. Okay. Hi, Abraham. But yeah, in all seriousness, you got to let go of the guilt. You got to have pride in what you have achieved and what you have accomplished and what you have yet to build. And you got to get yourself freaking borders, man. God has given you these great oceans, for heaven's sakes. You're not stuck in the middle of Europe. You have great oceans. Use them. Keep your culture. Keep your pride. Keep your respect for what you have built. Keep your damn country. Find politicians who will do it for you, or damn well do it yourself, but keep it no matter what. Thank you everyone so much. Great Lauren Southern is coming up. Thank you.
Enjoy that. That was very good, wasn't it? Well, next we have somebody who's not afraid to walk into Australia's no-go zones. We have Miss Lauren Southern.
Brisbane. I was told I would be in a lot of trouble, that you might go join the Antifa protesters outside if I said Brisbane, or throw a shoe at me. And then I'd have to drink out of it, because that's your tradition here, right? So far my trip in Australia has been absolutely lovely. Wonderful country, wonderful people, and then there's Melbourne. You know what, Melbourne, you know that old tale in the Bible when Abraham is talking to God about Sodom and Gomorrah? He's like, begging with God, God, if I can find 10 good people in Sodom and Gomorrah, please do not nuke Melbourne. We did find a few hundred good ones there. There is a silent majority, I believe, in Melbourne, so we can't nuke it yet, guys, I'm sorry. Now, as lovely as Australia and this trip has been overall, I will say, in all my years of politics, I have never been so lied about in one place. Obviously not by the people in this room, but if you're outside protesting, if you're with the media, or if you've been reading the media, there's a good chance you think we're just sitting in here for 2 hours spouting off slurs like we have racist Tourette's. Or, I don't know. Based on some of the things they've been saying about us, I think they maybe were performing esoteric rituals to summon Poseidon, or electrocuting baby puppies to create a Frankenstein version of good old Uncle Adolf. Seriously though, let's look at some of the things that have been said about me while I was waiting to come to this country. All right, do we have a slide? Anybody? Okay, Antifa's shut down the slides. There we go, xenophobic crap. Really, fascist was the first one. Anti-migration extremist should be coming up in a second. There we go. Alt-right white supremacist darling. I quite like that photo. I look absolutely psychotic. Hate speech espousing, that's the Herald, I believe. Race baiter, they called me in that article as well. And then terrorists who illegally opened fire on immigrant vessels in the US. Can't say I remember that one. I am prone to sleepwalking. That is a lot to achieve for a 23-year-old little Canadian girl. But in reality, I think we all know what most of these claims are, is slander. And even if I am being generous to the media, at best, it is a game of telephone where everyone is speaking different languages and half the participants are deaf. A prime example of this media game would be my recent trip to Lakemba. Did anyone here watch that video? Thank you. Now, for those of you who didn't, I'll give you just a brief overview of what happened. A few people told me that in Sydney there had been race riots before. There have been some areas that are a little prone to Muslim migration. And all over the world, when I do my journalism, plenty of people think I'm just making things up, but I actually go on the ground. And I see what is happening there before I make a judgment. I can't tell you if Australia has no-go zones or has an immigration problem unless I go on the ground and check it out for myself. So we got ourselves some security guys and we drove down to check out Lakemba, this area that I had heard rumors about that may have some integration issues. When we got there, within the first 10 minutes, of course it was hard to see a single sign in English, but before that we even had the media tipped off and running up to us saying, no, don't look at anything here. This is a perfectly normal street, and that's why we're here trying to stop you from looking at anything. And after that, within 15 minutes, when I went to go walk to the mosque, I had the police following me, then crossing the street and stopping me, saying, Lauren, you are not allowed to come in this area. I asked why. This is a public street, can I not be here? You are going to, what was the word he used? Breach of the peace, right, breach of the peace. It's the exact same word they used for me in the UK, same word they used for Tommy Robinson. It's this made-up thing where if you have different opinions and people get mad at you, you're breaching the peace and it's your fault suddenly. And he told me, if I go in this area, it is highly religious and people may be offended by me. And therefore, if they attack me, if they cause violence, I am the one at fault. And I may be arrested. So I was forced to leave Lakemba, but that told me everything I needed to know about this area. If I can't even walk there, if I can't even speak to people without a camera, if I can't even criticize Islam, you have a problem there. Now, there were 5 members of the media that were following me on that trip, taking pictures, interviewing me, videoing. They saw exactly what happened that day. And then I was having a perfectly great morning, the next morning, having my coffee, until I picked up a copy of the Daily Telegraph. And I open it to the second page, and the headline here, I have to give them credit for this headline. Lakemba ignores Canadian provocateur. Alt quiet on the Southern Front. Very good. Yeah, so I read the article, and they didn't mention once that the officer stopped me and told me I could not criticize Islam in the area. They didn't mention once that I was essentially kicked off the street for being a critic of Islam. In fact, this article says, it's by Eliza Barr and Marina Cohen, it says that the officer just happened to be wandering the streets and walked up to me to tell me how wonderful and diverse this area is. I'm not kidding, that's what it says. It says, he just randomly decided to walk up to me and tell me no one has any problems in this area. Random blonde lady, I just wanted to give you a lesson on diversity today. Really, really media, that's your story. Just phenomenal. So, as much as I would love to give the media the benefit of the doubt and say that this was just a mistake, an accident, foolish negligence, unfortunately this seems to be rather insidious and a dark effort to destroy Stefan and I's reputations.
Yeah, just lying cunts.
The media has spent so much time attacking caricatures of nationalists or right-wingers that they have forgotten what their job actually is. That maybe they should try to understand this phenomenon. Maybe they should try to understand why they are pushing so many people to the right wing. Instead, they conjure up these images of red flags adorned with spidery black symbols and hands raised at 45 degrees in order to get clicks and generate outrage and income. But the truth is that media, you can imagine words shouted from underneath a tiny little mustache all you want. You can screech Nazi all you want, but all it is doing is exposing that your reaction is Pavlovian, not well-articulated rational thought. And I want to mention here as well that it's not particularly sensitive of the media to refer to Stefan and I as fascists, racists, genocide supporters. Actually, I believe it was Channel 7 who, did anyone see this? They called me a self-identified racist and fascist, except they spelt fascist wrong, and it said fascist. If you have a face, I want nothing to do with you. I hate faces. But seriously, to call us these names is really to cheapen the experience of people who have lived under authoritarian regimes. It's like these feminists who go around and they compare being catcalled to being brutally gang raped. There's no comparison there. And it's a highly irresponsible act to cheapen these terms and compare them. So what should the media be doing instead of once again convincing us all that journalism degrees are simply barista certificates? What are they so afraid of Stefan and I coming here to talk to you about? Well, globalization is presenting humanity with new and difficult questions about identity that we have never quite encountered before. Questions of who are we? And what is our identity based on? Is it based on our religion, our ethnicity, our geography, our culture, our gender, our values, or even our government? These questions are not simple. And for those of you who have not found answers to them, you can be forgiven. To find satisfactory answers to these questions is a long and difficult task. Now, the group of citizens within the Australian government have proposed a potential answer to these questions, which they call multiculturalism. And according to this document here, Australia's multicultural statement, Australian identity should be based not on race, religion, or culture, but on shared values. such as, okay, get your boots out of your system. There you go. So they say it shouldn't be based on race, religion, or culture, but on shared values. Values such as freedom, democracy, the rule of law, and equality of opportunity. And that's fair enough. That is one legitimate proposal to a very thorny problem. I don't agree with the answer, but the proposal is legitimate nonetheless. You cannot fault someone for trying to come up with an answer to a very difficult question to which no one else seems to have a satisfactory answer. But having proposed one potentially legitimate answer does not mean any alternative proposals are suddenly not worthy. It doesn't mean that the discussion is over or that questions can no longer be asked. We certainly had an answer for a long time to how the solar system worked. The sun obviously rotates the Earth, you idiots. This is settled science. Hashtag sun orbiting is our strength. Hashtag don't listen to anti-Earth bigots. It's simple. However, it was through a long process of open inquiry that we painstakingly became aware that just because we had an established answer did not mean that it was the correct one. And the only reason that that inquiry ever happened was because people like Galileo were willing to be persecuted for their ideas. And I really hate when people pretend that we're better than our predecessors when they say, ooh, back then they used to persecute people for looking into science. They used to have Christian blasphemy laws. No, the only thing that has changed are the questions that are being asked and things we are being persecuted for saying. So my point here is that when it comes to the proposal that we should be multicultural societies, you do not have to immediately accept this solution. It is entirely valid that you remain unconvinced. I will continue to give multiculturalism a fair shot. And indeed, to debate, to challenge, and to critique multiculturalism is a part of that fair shot. And despite the fact that I am increasingly unconvinced, I would never attempt to silence the defenders of multiculturalism, because it is our willingness to consider the perspectives of others, the perspectives of those with whom we disagree, that gives us our legitimacy to challenge them and to question them and to propose alternatives. And on the contrary, those who are unwilling to consider alternative perspectives, who rather than listening and challenging those they disagree with, instead choose to put an end to inquiry altogether, they have chosen to relinquish the legitimacy of their critique. Because the only people who can partake in the discussion of our future are those who demonstrate a willingness to partake. Now, the people protesting outside this building, they are objectively ignorant of what is going on in this room. And they can't disprove their ignorance because they are out there condemning the very idea of inquiry itself. Not only are they opposed to becoming informed themselves, not only are they opposed to the discussion whatsoever, but they want all of Australia and New Zealand to remain in the dark with them. They pluck out their own eyes and they say, follow me, I see the path. The thing is, though, that no matter how hard these protesters try to shut down inquiry, no matter how much they want us to ignore these behemoths of questions that we face, at some point or another, we are going to be forced to answer them. You can't just sit around and hope that questions of our future will go away.
I see that being the biggest roadblock to us actually getting a Trump-like figure in politics or as the front runner. Your thoughts on compulsory voting and I guess...
You know, I spend a lot of years...
Be here this evening to introduce the first speaker to you. Now, 2 years ago, well, let's go back 3 years ago, I was a good blue pill popping, liberal, environmentalist, multiculturalist. Forgive me, I was raised in the Tweed Valley, that's the Rainbow region for anyone who hasn't heard of it, it's just the default position there. But I was given a book by a friend of mine, his name is Rob, he's here tonight, and it was a book called Everyday Anarchy, and some of you might have read that. It's by Stefan Molyneux. That book opened my eyes to how much bullshit we cop from the mainstream media, from our educational institutions.
Say we outnumber them. It's kind of sad that in Adelaide there was just a couple of them. Did you see the racist dog? Yeah. We sent out the umbrellas and they left with them. Sorry, they socialized them. My mistake. My mistake. But do we have any tweeters here tonight? You over there? You tweeting? Because, so, the New Zealand media, does anything happen in New Zealand except they wait for Canadians to come? One day soon, I'm going to start typing about Canadians. They really have gone quite mad in the media there. And the funny thing is to extract endless resources from the giant red vending machine called white guilt. And I'm here to make a case for you that this is desperately unhealthy, for you, for the Aborigines. And stop it. Stop it. Aborigines in Australia for about 40,000 years, give or take. You guys, 200 and change, give or take. So for the mathematically inclined, you, Europeans for the most part, European-derived whites, you've had Australia for 1/2 of the time the Aborigines had Australia. It's been a bit of a change. For the better. For the better. And why? Well, if you look at the Aborigine culture, the first place I always start when I'm looking at a culture is I look at the metaphysics, which is the fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality. Now, the West, for thousands of years, has been struggling to subsume metaphysics under philosophy. We are not brains in a tank, we are not mere puppets in the approach which the Aborigines take, which says that they believe in the dreaming, they call it, or the dream time. And I get there are 300 different bands, or 300 different language groups, 600 different bands, so I'm going to set a welfare state. Now that of course means the way that whites Europeans became smarter is winter. Because you've got to plan for winter, and you've got to defer gratification.
They open our borders, they erase our anthems, they tear down our statues and our history. We can all tell that something is off here. And Trump's slogan of "Make America Great Again" was the first to acknowledge that not only was America no longer great, but that something had gone horribly, horribly wrong, and it had to be fixed. And at the same time, it was that multiculturalism is a powder keg. And to speak of it directly is to threaten to set it off. For questioning it could light the match that causes it to explode.